Be sure to check us out on TikTok while you still can, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter to stay up to date with any new TWC content that gets put out. So I'm excited to get into this episode of the podcast. It will be exclusively football just because there is so much going on right now. If you're a football fan, then this has got to be your favorite part of the year. The NFL playoffs are in full swing. The college football playoff comes to a head on Monday with Ohio State and Notre Dame duking it out to see who will be the 2025 national champion. So, in this episode, I'll cover what happened in the wild card round, the matchups and predictions for round two of the NFL playoffs, and my predictions as well as Levi's because he was kind enough to send them in for Monday's national championship game. So the current state of the NFL playoffs look like this. On the AFC side, the Chiefs will play the Texans and the Ravens will play the Bills. And over on the NFC, the Lions will play the Commanders and the Rams will play the Eagles. So let's look at how we got here. The Texans beat the Chargers pretty decisively, 32-12, by just absolutely destroying the Chargers with their rush game and capitalizing on Justin Herbert's four picks. Now, I'm sure there have been playoff games in which a team has thrown four picks and ended up winning, but I'm sure that the win percentage there has got to be less than 20%. That's just not a recipe for a winning football game, especially in the playoffs when things get tighter. It's when the boys become men, all that good stuff. The Texans rushed for 118 more yards than the Chargers, just to put into perspective just how lopsided the rush game was there. And they also had 50 extra passing yards, so truly an all around throttling and a well deserved win by the Texans. In the Vikings and Rams game, it was a story of defense. The Rams made the Vikings O-line look like it was made out of Swiss cheese. Sam Darnold got sacked 9 times and actually set an NFL record for the most sacks on one player in a postseason game. The Rams won 27-9, and after the game, Matthew Stafford said they were out there playing for something bigger than themselves, a reference to the wildfires currently ravaging the LA area. So it was a good win for the Rams. LA definitely needs something to hold on to and rally behind right now. And we'll see how them dedicating their playoff run to the city of Los Angeles ends up working out for them in the long run. The Bills beat the Broncos 31-7, and there's really not much to dissect with this one because the Broncos got a touchdown in the first, and after that it was all Bills. Josh Allen just had a crazy completion stat. He went 20 for 26 the entire game, and that is what you call a masterclass. The Eagles beat the Packers 22-10, though in actuality the game was a lot closer than the final score would have you believe. With 8 minutes left in the fourth, it was 16-10, and the Eagles just ended up getting two crucial field goals to run out the score at the end. So after the first one, it was 19-10, and it was pretty much over, but there was still some slight hope that the Packers could make an epic comeback, but the Eagles clinched it with a second field goal with 3 minutes left on the clock. Now, I was really rooting for the Packers in this game because I wanted Jordan Love to be able to get some great playoff experience, and I thought that a second round appearance would really help him step into a leadership position on the Packers. I mean, as their quarterback and franchise player, he's already in a leadership position, but no pun intended, he still feels green to me. His three interceptions that he threw would seem to back up my feelings on that. And I just felt that a deeper playoff run would be good for him to have something to sink his teeth into and help him become more of a vet status. That way, if next time he makes it, been there, done that, it's not as stressful the second time. Now, somebody you can't accuse of being green is Jalen Hurts. From college to the NFL, he's shown that he's able to get it done when the lights are the brightest. Now, he didn't have a crazy game. Saquon Barkley was their go-to on offense, but Jalen Hurts is still the heart and soul of that team. And he's had Super Bowl experience before, and he very well could add to his Super Bowl resume this year, but we'll get to that later on. Now, Saquon Barkley deserves to get all the flowers being thrown his way right now because he had 25 carries for 119 yards and was just absolutely dominant. But I want to take the time to give some love to Josh Jacobs. Now, he went for 18 carries for 81 yards, which is impressive in and of itself. But the quality of those carries was absolutely insane. At one point, he broke off 4 defenders, and it just felt like he was going to single-handedly will the Packers to win that game. It was one of the most legit running back performances I've seen in a while, and the Packers are definitely onto something with the duo of Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs. I hope that's a combination that can lead them to a lot of playoff success in the future, and that is what I would hang my hat on if I'm a Packers fan for the post Aaron Rodgers era. Now, the Commanders and Bucks game was the only one that truly came down to the wire. The Commanders won 23-20 because of a Zane Gonzalez field goal that dinked in after whacking the right side of the goalpost. Now, when I was watching it, the first thing that kick reminded me of was the Eastern Conference semifinals in 2019 when Kawhi hit that buzzer beater against the 76ers that bounced around the rim like 3 different times before it fell in. This is as close as you're going to get to seeing that in the NFL. There was no time left on the clock after that field goal, so it was a walk-off. If it dinked the other way, it would have meant overtime, but somehow they got that field goal post right on the sweet spot, and it ended up falling in to give the Commanders a much-needed playoff win, their first one since 2005, I believe. And the Commanders, they were actually down 17-13 going into the fourth, but they just always felt to me like they were going to pull it out. They had confidence the entire game, and that's something that's hard to come by in a playoff situation. I mean, the ability to be down and still have swagger and still exude confidence is just a skill you can't teach. And if I'm a Commanders fan, I'm very thrilled that my team has the ability to hold up under pressure like that. Now, Jaden Daniels had an absolutely dynamic performance, throwing for 268 yards and leading his team in rushing too, with 36 yards on 13 carries. Now, Mike Evans, even though the Bucks lost, he had a stellar game and absolutely cooked the Commanders' defense. He had 7 receptions and 92 yards and absolutely cooked Marshawn Lattimore in particular. Now, they have a lot of playoff history. I believe they're the most head-to-head playoff matchups in the NFL right now as far as like a defender covering an offensive player. And Mike Evans won this round. Hopefully for our sakes we get to see some more installations of this before they get too old. But if I'm the Buccaneers, I'm really upset that we lost this one because Baker played a good game. Mike Evans played a good game as well. It's not a matter of the Buccaneers did anything particularly wrong. It's just the Commanders, they just had it. Jaden Daniels, it's hard to stop a guy who's leading his team in both throwing yards and rushing yards, and it's not a bad performance for the team. So there's just nothing you can really do with that. Now, the wild card matchup I was most looking forward to was Ravens and Steelers. I was most interested in seeing how Lamar Jackson would perform. Historically, he struggled a lot in the playoffs. His record going into this game was 2-4, and his statistical drop off was very noticeable. It reminded me a lot of James Harden back in his Houston days, somebody who would put up record-breaking stats in the regular season, but never be able to carry it over into the postseason. So because of that, me and I would imagine all the Ravens fans were watching to see how well he would perform. And he did really good. I can't say he had like a great career performance or anything, but he did a very good job out there. He completed 16 of 21 passes, threw for 175 yards, and had 2 touchdowns The Ravens won 28-14, which is a very handy win. Derrick Henry, though, was the MVP of that game for the Ravens. He had 186 rushing yards, and this is the most confident I've ever felt in the Ravens' ability to make a Super Bowl run. They just seem like they've been firing on all cylinders here lately, and I'm excited to see what they'll do in their next round game against the Bills. I mean, the Ravens, they were in control for the entire game, and it never once seemed to me like the Steelers were going to win. Russell Wilson did good as well, but if there was any doubt left that his era is truly over, this game sealed it for me. There's going to be a lot of debate on the Steelers side of things this offseason about whether Russell Wilson or Justin Fields should get the starter slot. And given that Russell Wilson will be 37 before next season's over, I'd expect Justin Fields to get the nod there. So I don't know if Russell Wilson will become accepting of a backup spot or if we'll see him in a different uniform come the start of next season, but that will be a fun off-season storyline to keep track of. And so that was a wild card round. On Saturday, the Texans and Chiefs play at 4:30 and the Commanders and Lions play at 8. Now, it'll be something to look forward to see if there's any rust on the Chiefs and Lions since they got a bye last week and didn't play the week before either. But I think the Chiefs should beat the Texans pretty handily. They played them as recently as December 21st and won 27-19. That game saw the Texans get absolutely outmatched by the Chiefs' offensive depth, and nothing has changed in the last month to negate that. C.J. Stroud played as good a game as you can hope for your quarterback to do against Patrick Mahomes minus his 2 picks, but the Chiefs' run game put them over the edge. The real story of this game on Saturday is not if the Chiefs will win or not, because I expect everybody to think that they will, despite how dominant the Texans were against the Chargers. The question is how much the Chiefs will win by. And if I'm a Chiefs fan, I'm hoping to see them absolutely dominate. I've said this numerous times this season, but the Chiefs have had a slog of a regular season and just did not feel like themselves. Their record looked great, but if you actually watch the games, it was not as impressive as the record would have you to think. A lot of close, down-to-the-wire wins against teams that were well below the Chiefs' pay grade. Now, the assumption made by a lot of people were that the Chiefs are back-to-back champs and they were just waiting their way through the regular season, waiting for the postseason to start. They've gotten to a point where they're so successful that they put all their eggs in the postseason basket. The regular season is more of a chore for them than anything. Well, now the postseason is here, and it's time to find out if that narrative is actually what was happening, or if that was just an excuse people were making to justify the Chiefs' uninspired play. Now, I'm going to say the Chiefs win decisively, but not dominantly. I think they'll win by no more than 14 points. And that'll leave a lot of red flags, I think, for how they'll perform in the AFC Championship game. But I'll save my prediction for that for next week because I already have a prediction for it, and we'll see how that holds up. Now, with the Lions and Commanders game, the story will once again be that of the injuries on the Lions. They managed to absolutely stomp the Vikings last week with their injured roster being a lot bigger than it is now. But there's still 3 players out, Kevin Zyder, Pat O'Connor, and Taylor Decker. They all missed practice this week. Decker's expected to play Saturday. Zyder's questionable, and O'Connor most likely will not play. So, what does that mean? I think the Lions will win, but the question of how well they play in a playoff situation compared to the regular season matchup against the Vikings with the hobbled roster will be an important test for seeing just how deep of a playoff run they can make. And also, given they have had some people come back into their rotation after the Vikings game, are those players 100%? And how well will they be able to fit back into the Lions' chemistry? But on the whole, I think the Commanders are very lucky to get past the Buccaneers, and this is where their luck runs out. On Sunday, the Rams and Eagles play at 3, and the Ravens and Bills play at 6:30. So despite the Rams dedicating their playoff run to LA, I'm not expecting some miracle run to take place in honor of the city struggling through awful wildfires right now. So thoughts out to LA. Hopefully they're able to get those fires under control very quickly. Despite the Rams beating the Vikings handily, one important stat from that game that's flying under the radar is that the Rams had 10 penalties that cost them 95 yards. Now, that might have been an outlier game for them penalty-wise, but it does show a lack of discipline that if it carries over, it's going to be a long night for the Rams. You might be able to get away with 10 penalties against the Vikings that are a fifth seed, but the second seed, the Eagles, who are one of the best teams in football, they'll punish you for every mistake that you make and do it with a smile. So the Rams need to make sure that if they lose, it's because the Eagles played the better game and not because they had self-inflicted wounds. But the Eagles beat the Rams 37-20 earlier this season, and I expect a similar outcome in this game. I think the Eagles will put on a showcase. Saquon Barkley will rush for over 80 yards, and we'll get an Eagles-Lions NFC Championship game. The most exciting game, though, this weekend will be the Bills and the Ravens. There's a reason the NFL saved it for last on Sunday. Both of these teams have a history with the Chiefs, and the Chiefs has probably prevented both of them from getting at least one Super Bowl. So no matter who wins, I'm expecting a really fun AFC Championship game, assuming, of course, that the Chiefs beat the Texans. Now, I asked Levi what his predictions were for the NFL playoffs, and he is with me pretty much to a T for all of this stuff, except for this game. This is where we reach a impasse. I'm rocking with the Ravens on this one. He's going with the Bills. So the reason I'm going with the Ravens is I'm assuming that Lamar Jackson will have at least as good of a performance as he had against the Steelers, if not better. So that's the hinge point here. If Lamar does revert back to his old ways and has a James Harden playoff flop performance, then of course the Bills will win. But I'm going to assume the best for Lamar and put my integrity and prediction on the fact that he will live up to what I think he can do in the playoffs and have a good game. Now, the Ravens and the Bills played in the regular season, and the Ravens beat the Bills 35-10. I think this game will be a lot closer than that one, but that is something to note. I mean, a 25-point difference isn't something you can really scoff at. That's a big blowout for two teams that are playing in the playoffs. And if I'm the Ravens, I'm looking back on that game and I'm feeling very confident. They know they can beat them by a lot, and there's something about knowing that gives you an inflated sense of determination and grit for this game right here. Now, that was a week 3 game, though, so a lot has changed since then. But ultimately, I think if Lamar and Derrick Henry are firing on all cylinders, then I don't know if any team can beat the Ravens. Now, the big question for the Ravens going into this game is whether or not they'll have Zay Flowers. He went down with an injury at the end of the regular season and is questionable for Sunday. He didn't practice this week, so it'll probably be a day of game decision. I hope he's able to play. That would be a huge piece to have in their arsenal, assuming the Ravens do make it past the Bills for an eventual AFC and Super Bowl championship game. But if he can't play on Sunday, then I think the Ravens, if they do get by the Bills, need to sit him out for the rest of the playoffs. The AFC championship game is too late to start tinkering with team chemistry, even if Zay Flowers is a key piece of theirs. That's just, if you made it this far without him, see how far that can take you. I don't know. I would just be really nervous to reinsert somebody back into the lineup when you've done fairly well without him. So those are my predictions. I'm very excited to see how this shakes out. I think the two most important games here are the Bills and the Ravens, and the Eagles and the Rams. Now, moving on to the national championship game, I think it's very fitting that the first national championship being played under the new playoff format features fifth seeded Notre Dame playing a sixth seeded Ohio State, two teams that wouldn't have even made the playoffs last year. I'm really glad they expanded the playoffs, and stuff like this is why. A four-team playoff cuts out teams that are still really good and have the capacity to make a huge impact on the playoffs, as this postseason has shown. I mean, Notre Dame beating number 2 Georgia, that's massive. That would not have happened under last year's rules. And I think depth is a good thing to have in your league. And the previous playoff format punished the NCAA football for having depth. If you have more than four teams who could conceivably win the national championship, that's awesome from a fan's perspective and makes for a hugely exciting playoff. You want a good team to win or lose on their own merits, not because the selection committee used some vague criteria to rank them at 5 instead of 4, and that's the end of their season. So this format could still use some tinkering, but it's a massive improvement over what it was, and I'm excited for this game. I was surprised that Ohio State beat Texas last week, so I guess the SEC is not as legit as I thought it was, but Ohio State, not only did they beat Texas, they beat them very, very decisively, 28-14. Now, it was somewhat closer than that towards the end, but Quinn Ewers had a huge fumble at the end of that game that allowed Ohio State to rack up the score a little bit. And Ohio State's definitely riding a higher wave of momentum than Notre Dame, who only beat Penn State by 3 last week. But that being said, I'm digging Notre Dame's miracle run, and I think the luck of the Irish is going to win out and give Notre Dame their first national championship since 1988. Now, Levi has asked me to tell y'all that he thinks Notre Dame will win in dramatic fashion with the walk-off field goal for a final score of 30-27. I'm not going to give exact score predictions. I'm not confident enough in my ability to do so, but I'll take Levi for his expertise here, and for entertainment's sake, hopefully that pays off and he can come on next week and give a big victory lap. But we'll see. I'm taking Notre Dame, and I'm excited both for this weekend of NFL play and Monday's national championship game. And I will see y'all next week. Y'all have a good one.